What I'm going to try to do in the next couple of slides, basically, to try to, sometimes you have to have a catchy title, friend or foe, but the idea is basically to zoom into the cyberspace and see the impact of AI from both angles, so to speak. I like numbers, so you're going to have 10. You can follow me, 10 slides. I cheated somewhere, so one slide I split it into 2, so you have 11 there. Who likes reading books here? All right, great. The harder question, who read the book Strange Case of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde? I'm sure you're not as old as the book, definitely. It's 1886. So the book is basically wrote by a Scottish writer, Robert Lewis, in the 1886, and it's a novel, right? And the discussion these days about the AI and cyber and all of that remind me of that book. It's a well-known story for dualities, which is same entity, human invention, hold both thoughts of good and evil. So in that book, that writer, he went that the Dr. Jekyll is the main character. He's fascinated about the human nature and created kind of a potion, medicine, so to speak, to transform part of him to trigger the darkness side of him that brought the Mr. Hyde, right? And he thought as a primary person, Dr. Jekyll, that he will have always that control onto the other character. And it didn't end well. I'll have different answer later, but that duality is very important in today's discussion. Bringing it back to the cybersecurity, as you know, the friend part is basically we think that we could do red teaming, identify vulnerabilities, all of that, whereas the foe side of it is very clear. The cyber criminals and all of that will leverage it to speed up and all of that. So we will try to talk about both angles in the discussion today. All right. So I realized in such talk we have a diverse audience between people who might be very good in cyberspace all the way to people who might not be familiar with the cyberspace. So for the expert, forgive me, I'm doing 101 of cyber here to carry on the discussion. Basically, in cyberspace, to bring you to the ground, we follow usually high-level 2 frameworks. On the attacker side, it's a MITRE ATT&CK framework, how adversaries move across the attack chain of computer systems. There is 15 categories. I just picked 6 to make it simple. Between reconnaissance scanning systems to initial access to privilege escalation within the system to credential access, again, sometimes the attackers need to do something we call it lateral movement between computers to do stuff or systems, all the way to command and control. That's where the attacker wants. Once they get that, it's time to do damage and do exfiltration from the system. Each one of those steps, historically, it needs competence, it needs skills, it needs time, and all of that. I'll have some examples where we are at now with the AI side. On the defender side, NIST Cybersecurity Framework 2.0 is the one, usually it's the 101. And we go a couple of steps there. Govern, which is basically set the appetite risk of the organization to identify what are your assets, digital assets, dependencies, all of that. We go to protect now, how to make sure the system is hard, configurations and all of that. You need to have detection in place. People use AI and other tools to detect, and you need response in case I'm compromised, and you need to recover, restore the system. So this is our basics on the both the defender and the attacker. I will go further with an example, so at least you have when I talk later about vulnerability, exploitation, exfiltration, you have an example. Hopefully you don't go and try that example, And in most of the cases, systems will not have that kind of silly example. But the example is very simple. There is a website that offers PDFs as a download. Very straightforward. What we do usually behind the scene, for you, you just request the website link. Behind the scene as a developer, we will have command like get https portal.example whatever download / file equal to what is the file name. Straightforward. The attackers knows something through scanning is basically that input is not checked. That basically simple report.pdf. So I can't change it as an attacker, right? So that's the vulnerability. What the attacker do, they will just change the report.pdf into something else. Guess what? Secret.txt, it could be. Configuration of the system, whatever. So that's where the scanning, where the attacker's variations will happen. And if the attackers is lucky that you don't have the checks in place, they already got your, whether it's secrets.txt or MD or configuration of the system. Now they gain some information from the system. They will look at it and they will use it for next steps of attack. I'm just giving quick examples here to move on. All right. So the theme 3 I have is basically the AI compresses attack economics. That's the key where the AI leveraged by the FU, right, in the cyberspace. Couple of things. Here are the key ones, but there are many others. The skill barriers, which I mentioned earlier. Before, in cybersecurity, the guys who are in the cyberspace, we map the attackers, state actors, criminals, all the way to, we call them script kiddies, who are just don't know, university students. We have bright ones, but they're just trying to learn, and we can, through the attack for the system, through the attack to our system, we can tell, actually, this is a script kiddies, or this is a state actor. The problem with the AI, it blurry those boundaries. That's the skill barrier. Young kid, 16-year-old, with the capabilities of the AI model, they could ask all these questions and get the right answers if they have that motives to go for it. Second is basically the time to action. It's very clear. The switch between the stages I was talking about, before the human will be between them doing reconnaissance, exploitation, exfiltration. Now that AI can do that faster, especially if they understand the context. Cost of retries, the same. Now it's a cost of tokens. Million tokens will get cheaper and cheaper. They can do all these variations and learn through that. And finally, which you all observe, is basically the scale, personalization, and contextualization. So I can go after, as an attacker, I can go after 10 organizations at the same time and contextualize the attack across all these 10 organizations. There is no issues from the attacker perspective to do that. Now I'll go back to give you a little bit more, once we are doing the analysis now, where the LLMs or the agentic AI good at across that MITRE ATT&CK framework. So where the attackers now, I'm sure they are using it in various ways. Very quickly, in the reconnaissance, summarizing targets. Reconnaissance is basically I'm trying to gather as much as information about my target, right? So the LLMs, agentic AI, doing that reasonably well now, right? Exposing assets, collecting information from open intelligence. You go to MISP and others, there is a lot of information out there, and try to synthesize that very quickly. You go to the initial access, which happened, attackers need to generate phishing emails, convincing pretext and all of that. The LLM is good at that now. The privilege escalation, which is basically, privilege escalation basically when they get access to the system, they want to have a little bit of admin access. If there is a misconfiguration, they can, now the LLMs understand that a little bit, with a little bit of, sometimes the attackers will give it access to some tools, like Metasploit and some of those tools, and it could potentially, the attackers will fill in that gap. credential access as well. The example I gave last slide is you got the secrets. So from the secrets, the LLMs can analyze what I have got, what is the value I have in the stuff that I extracted, and it could identify quickly if you are not doing a good job as a defender to extract that. Lateral movement, I mentioned about that. Basically, with the access to tools, you could move between devices, and command and control is the same. Command and control, once you are there, you need to generate scripts. The LLMs and agentic AI are good at that, all the way to exfiltration, which is basically, in exfiltration, you need to collect documents. It could be large-scale documents. With the AI, nowadays, you could analyze all of that. My talk so far sounds like I'm doing a favor for the attacker. I'm giving all the tick, tick, tick. And that's intentional, by the way. Why? Because what I learned in cyberspace is you don't assume that the attacker is not capable and have those capabilities. Let's go to the end, right? They have all these capabilities. Then what? How we could react as a defender? You are expecting me to mention methods. I can mention methods here, and I will move to the next slide because everybody talking about it. So very quickly, our colleagues at the UKAC. So Mythos is not available now to the community. You probably heard it's only available for 40 organizations. But our colleagues in UKAC, they have a cyber range. Cyber range is basically a network simulation, a couple of computers connected to each other. And they tried all the models that coming up. Latest is Mythos. I'm showing you some high-level numbers just to have the feeling. Within that cyber range, there is around 32 steps. So Mythos was the first model that gets all the way to 32 steps. Before that, we didn't get anywhere too close to that number. We usually do tries, multiple tries, in case like it's a by luck. Mythos got to 3 out of 10, which is the highest among other models as well. If you want to dig deeper a little bit into those steps, the average Mythos got is around 22 steps out of 32. To give you a sense of where other models at, the closest one was 16. So I'm trying to give you an indication that we have a slope. So they are getting better and better at this, and success rate is 73%. But I want to also not to have the fear-mongering here. I want to ground the results a little bit, means one side, there is a continuous improvement, clear. The model is getting better at plan, act in complex systems. But at the same time, that cyber range is no defender in place. So no detection. If you want to categorize organizations, it's in the lower quartile of organizations usually where they don't have the capital to have defense and detection. We do have those organizations. So those organizations are exposed. All right. My theme number 6 is basically, while all the conversations now, and it could be a little bit of that also marketing play, a lot of conversations is around the vulnerability detection, basically, the discovery of vulnerabilities. Oh, the system has vulnerabilities that humans never detect, and we managed to detect. Now, I'll talk quickly about the detection side, and then what is next. So on the detection side, the play is between the defense and the friend and foe at the same time. On the friend side, very clear. I can find the vulnerabilities very quickly. We could use it as a defender advantage. I could prioritize and triage very quickly. That's the assumption. It could help me support patching of those systems, pre-release security checks. So moving forward, why I release some of those systems when they have those vulnerabilities, all the way to hardening some of the legacy code base. But then we can't ignore the foo side of us. The capability may diffuse beyond trusted defenders organizations. So it will be accessible by others. And arguably now, even some latest open source models like GLM 5.2, if you heard about it, they are a few months behind the frontier labs. So they are catching up. Outpace verification, gain cheaper access to vulnerabilities, and and so on and so forth. But the most important point I want you to take from here is basically vulnerability detection is one major step. But what that means is basically how we're going to go after the detection. I need patching and fast-paced execution. So if I'm detecting vulnerabilities on the scale of thousands per day, do we have the capabilities now to create those patches timely, execute those patches without ruining our systems? We want our systems to be functional. And one thing we learned is through the last many years is when you touch that system, the system will be unstable through all these patches. So those are the challenges that we're not talking about now because the focus more on the vulnerability detection. Okay, let's go a little bit to the defender side now. I think from the defender side, the structural advantages, I'll go 3 by 3 here. So on the attacker side, we talked about cheap retries and fast iterations. We talked about asymmetric access because one win is enough for the attacker. As a defender, it's like a goalkeeper and an attacker. Like, as the goalkeeper, I need to catch everything. If I lost 2, I lost the game. Whereas the attacker, I could shoot, many, but then I get 1, I'm the winner, and I have the day. But then as a defender, we shouldn't lose our balance. We still have full asset knowledge. The context of the system is still on our side as a defender. The attacker is unless you have an insider attacker, which is a different story. But in most of the cases, that's our strength. We have logs, telemetry, identity data access, and all of those. We have the authority to isolate, patch, and so on. And in most of the cases, when I go to events like this, and I see people face to face, it reminds me, this is also our strength. As a defender, we can come into big rooms across countries. I have the colleagues from the AC. We have the network with other ACs. We can do a lot of things in the open where the attackers can't. So that is all strength that we shouldn't forget from there. But I think more importantly, assume that we stuck with a lot of legacy systems now. And the discussion is, of course, we need to repair those legacy systems. But ideal situation, I think it's a lost game for us to keep chasing the attackers and try to follow up with the vulnerabilities. If a system now running, it has 500 vulnerabilities, we need to deal with that. But the ideal situation is we should move as a defender to the secure by design mentality rather than just chasing vulnerabilities. And there are many ideas there. I'm just mentioning on the high level, design time security. So we could actually design the system where it has least potential vulnerabilities, least dependencies on other things, and so on and so forth. The other thing is policy and configuration is like a proactive way rather than reactive way. And most importantly, of course, as a legacy system, we do have a lot of systems now as a legacy. We need to have code hardening. We deal with some of those problems. But I think short term, in my view, it's more about how to fast detect and solve those parts in terms of patching and so on. But then the medium to longer term is about the secure by design. All right. Theme 9. The horizon is basically between those 3, the continuous assurance, the resilience, and rapid recovery. So I'll just say a few words about those 3. I think the continuous assurance, I touched on that in the previous slide, which is basically rather than you wait for the vulnerability to happen, certificate expires. We are talking to big organizations where all these, they are on their back foot just trying to catch up. It has to move into more proactive assurance. Before those certificates expire, I need to know a month ahead or something like that. All those stuff AI could help with. But more importantly, I think it's like we are in the time of the World Cup now, and when you watch teams, you can tell when the team is resilient. When they get the goal and then they could come back, that's the resilience part. No matter what we're going to do on the defense side, resilience and recovery are the key. right? And in most of the cases, when you say resilience, we have systems of systems interconnected. And every now and then we see that we are not planning well. When part of the system goes down, the whole system goes down, and people trying to figure out what happens. Plus, it's very hard to recover. And if you go back to my NIST framework, there is a lot of work around govern, identify, detect, yada, yada. There is less work around recover, right? And I think now in the era of very advanced AI, we need a very fast-paced resilience and recover, because we will see more of those issues, not less. It's unfortunate, but that's the reality that we need to deal with. All right. My theme 10, a few key takeaways, and trying to connect back to my 1886 book, Friend and Foe. So AI will accelerate attackers. I showed you examples of the mapping and from the reconnaissance all the way to exfiltration. But we are hoping that AI will also strengthen the defender side through now detection, patching, and all of that, hopefully all the way to the secure by design. I did mention earlier the detection alone is not enough. We need to have solutions for fast-paced patching while the system is operating. Resilience becomes the deciding factor. And ending with the future is the proactive secure by design. Back to Dr. Jekyll and his Hyde. In my view, I'm commenting in a book that's 120 years, 130 years, whatever the math. I think what he missed is basically he thought the good side of him will be the primary, and the Mr. Hyde, the fool, always secondary. And they got just to flick a switch to switch that off when they want. I think that's the wrong way to go about it. I think what we should do, probably in my view, is it's both there. And we should assume they are independent entities, that they are moving together, moving forward. So whatever we are doing on the defender side, on the attacker side, we need to make sure that's uncontrollable, means they will have the capabilities, they will attack those systems. So what we need to do with that exists there. Finally, that's my last slide. We wrote a paper with our colleagues from the UK, Alan Turing and others. If you are interested to read more about the topic, that's the paper. That's my time. Thank you.